Okay, we're live. Happy Friday, everybody. Today is September 5th, and you're hanging out with my community manager, the community built by, for, and managed by community managers. If you like what you're watching, you could, or I'm sorry, I just got done telling everybody what a long day so far I've had, but you can chat along with us over on Twitter at our tweet chat at hashtag CMGR Hangout. Where some of you are watching. If you love what you're seeing today, you have a great idea and would like to help us out, go to our website at mycmgr.com, and there's a button that says participate. Fill out that form and give us topic ideas. Tell us you want to be on the show. It's really you guys who drive this and make it awesome. So today is the topic of ROI. We'll talk about things like measuring value, demonstrating importance, et cetera, et cetera. I think just about everyone loves talking about ROI as it relates to social media and especially community management. No matter what side of the fence of this ROI fence you're really on. But at the end of the day, it's all really important to just know and show that we're making an impact on our company's goals. Really the company's goals. So shout out to Sarah and Carrie over on Twitter who are helping us out there. And with that, I'll let everyone introduce themselves, starting with Sherry.
Oh, hey, I was already distracted by Twitter. Hey everyone, I'm Sherry Rohde, and I co-produce CMGR Hangout here with Brew, as well as lead community and user experience at a company called Rebellion Media. Jen.
That's me. Hey everyone, I'm Jen Lopez. I'm the Director of Community at Moz. And I just realized I think I have a really bad echo in here. Anyway, so what we do is we have software for marketers, and my team has the fun task of managing a community of essentially our own community. Like, we're marketers with a community of marketers, so it's always fun and interesting.
Hey everybody, I am Dom Garrett with CET International. I'm the social media specialist for CET and for Satusa. We are a international foreign exchange student program, and yeah, my office is in Grand Rapids, but we're based out of Bellingham, Washington, and I am really excited to talk about ROI because I'm a masochist.
Hey guys, my name is David Hurley. I'm the community manager for Joomla, an open source content management system. It's a pretty large community that I'm involved in, and I'm also the founder of Mautic, which is a free and open source marketing automation.
Okay guys, just like David, I'm a community manager for an open source CMS as well. Also a pretty large community, and I think David and I also already concluded that we probably not come up with a very good answer. So we are, of course, both working for an open source community and not for a company, which is pretty different dynamics than for a company. So let's see where we get.
Awesome. And hi, everybody. I'm Brew, Director of Awesome at BTC Revolutions, where we build communities and ignite movements. And I personally do community management, as well as kind of take the lens of community management and apply it to a lot of the social strategies that we do for our customers. So our first question, and hopefully everyone has a little bit to add to this, is what aspects of community can be measured? So what are some of the top things that come to your head when you think about measuring community?
Maybe I can start out with that. So in our community, we typically use some tools, some issue trackers and stuff like that, and we could measure activity on those issue trackers and see, what's going on there. That would be a measurement, maybe of what's going on, maybe not only of success, but that's something which you really could measure. Some of the other things that we sometimes look at, is the how much do the number of members increase on our website. That's something that can be measured. And I'm also really fond of measuring in a way the happiness of the community. It's a pretty difficult thing to do, and sometimes also not something that's within your control. But I would say that's some of the things that you guide as a community, the happiness within your community.
Yeah, I tend to think that many things can be measured, but it's more or less what matters to you that you actually care about, right? So you can measure how many signups you get and how many comments you're getting or replies or tweets or whatever it is. You can measure lots and lots of things, but not all of it may matter to you or matter to the C-suite, right? So to me, it often is. It really depends company to company what matters to you. If it's all about building brand, helping with customer service, right? So it's more or less determining what it is that that your company even cares about to determine what it is that you want to measure, because you can measure like all kinds of things. For us, we tend to know that if you have been a community member, like a free community member participating on our site, before you pay us money for our software, you stick around longer, you vest quicker. So you're essentially a better paying member if you participate in community. So we work very hard at getting people to engage and do things on the site, because we know that the longer they're there, that the better, the more they're going to pay us. So those are things that we, find ourselves focusing on.
I think you're right on the money. I mean, the key takeaway is it's not what you can measure, it's what you should measure when looking at the aspects of your community, because you can, just like you said, measure anything. But what's really important is focusing on finding what you should measure.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. I know for us personally, one of our biggest things that we look at, that I've been attempting to show the C-suite and the different people, is really engagement, because a lot of times when you're talking with people that aren't as familiar with what your role might be, they go on some of the more outdated type data sets, like maybe page likes or just traffic to the website or email signups, which are all important, but at the same time, we really look at who's interacting, what types of things are they interacting on, that type of things that can be measured, retweets or replies or comments, but just the beginnings of conversation, because really that's what I think that all of us our goal is to try to do, is to try to spark that conversation to create a connection between brand and consumer.
Yeah, I think there's things that we measure on our community that are more of like a gauge, right? So things like your community size, your growth rate, engagement rate, all of that, those are things that you want to measure so that you just sort of know that if you're doing the right things, hey, this is what I expect these numbers to be, that I consider my community healthy. But in the conversation, I think of ROI, I think it's important to define with the company what are things that you can measure together. So Dom, you mentioned email signups. Well, there's probably somebody in that company who has a number that is calculated that is their average cost for an email sign up, right? Between the marketing they're doing or some banner ads they're placing or whatever, right? And so if you can find that out and then find a way that you can measure, hey, here's how I contributed to that. I think those are the awesome things to be measuring. To be proving your ROI. So kind of those saving money measurements and those making money measurements that everyone's already probably got a number for.
Yeah, I think you touched on something really, really important, which is having those conversations with people outside of your particular team. Because just yesterday I was talking with someone on our content team, which although we work together quite often, we're not, we're all on the marketing team, but we're not, in the same team within the marketing team. And he mentioned to me that he was, just looking at some data on various things and found out that of all the comments ever left on our website, 50% of those comments were made by people who at one point in time paid us money. 50% of the comments. And we have a very strange blog in that, we can write a blog post about using HTTPS on your website, and we get like 100 comments, which is really weird, right? It sounds really boring and blah, blah. But we get a ton and ton of comments, and so we're seeing that like, oh, okay, so again, that goes back to people who are very active on our site and in our community are better paying members for us also. So it's talking with the other people because they're looking at some of the data also that you may not have necessarily thought of like, oh yeah, that's extremely important. We should be looking at that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we have like an overall team goal, like beyond just our community team, of non-page page views on the site, because that's what we've chosen as a metric to show that there really is a lot of value on our site for people to keep coming back. And so every sub-team basically of our team, including our community team, knows what their #1 goal is to feed into that main goal. And so that's how we kind of look at it. So for us, like click-throughs from our social media interactions and everything and comments on the site and whatnot are all contributing to that.
Sweet. Rolling us into the next topic here is how do you analyze the data as a team? And I think, do you sit down? Do you analyze it weekly, monthly? Do you use certain tools? How are you looking at your data with your teams?
I'll jump in again.
Oh, go ahead, Jen.
Sorry, I'll be quick. You can jump in. So one thing that we do, we look at things on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, and a daily basis. So what we're tracking on a weekly basis are our specific KPIs that we have set, and then on a monthly basis, we're reporting that out to the rest of the team. So we send an email. We're very open with our numbers, so we also promote that publicly as well. I will find a link to our latest one and show you guys. So from a social standpoint, what exactly a lot of the things that we're looking at and measuring. So we do that on a weekly basis so that we can send something out on a monthly basis. And then we're also looking daily at what's doing really well, what's not doing really well, how can we promote this piece of content better, how something looked in Facebook compared to Twitter and how we need to tweak it, or, so we're constantly looking at how we can fix things. But the things that we really report on are these engagement numbers on a weekly and then monthly basis. And I'm going to look that up real quick and I'll post it in the chat. So.
Yeah, I think that's really great. I think anytime you think about like how you really do it as a team, I think the big thing when it comes to before even analyzing the data is setting the goals beforehand. So you have some sort of a baseline of what you're actually looking at. It's really important, myself and the people that I work with, we set the goal for what it is and sort of reverse engineer it to see what numbers we want to try to get to, and then try to go about it that way. So that I think is really the best way for us, at least what we've seen, to analyze it, because it sort of gives us a benchmark to go off of. And then again, like Jen was saying, I mean, when it comes to the day-to-day stuff, if you see something's really popping, something's really caught fire, you really want to dig in and be like, all right, so why are people really liking this? So you can try to play it in other ways as well.
It's interesting. Yeah, I'll be honest to say, like, I kind of have looked at the analysis of the data almost as a very small thing, that you do and then provide the results with the rest of the team, right? So it's sort of you do a deep dive, maybe it's one or two people, and then you're bringing in the larger team to sort of review the results of that analysis. And I've never thought about kind of bringing in the larger team to pitch in with the analysis, because they probably will end up seeing things that maybe you've missed because they're seeing that data from their perspective. Anybody else have anything they want to talk about on data analysis, or should we move on?
Come on, people, data's awesome. Sexy spreadsheets.
Well, I was going to say, if you're watching and joining us on Twitter, feel free, just like every week, you can tweet us your questions, and we'll bring them in and talk about them. So go ahead and do that, and sure, you'll bring them in for us. Ben, you were going to say something.
Yeah, exactly. I would like to get into this topic a little bit with David, maybe. So for us, as being an open source community, it's totally different than from a community perspective. So I would like to also ask David, how do you deal with these data? So I see that, so for us specifically, we do have an association, that kind of governs the whole community, and for us it's more chaotic. So we keep kind of track of what's our market share, so we can see this at the CMS tracker, and at a certain point, when it kind of drops, there is this kind of panic reaction where we deal with, but we do not really have things like email sign up and stuff like this to deal with. How is that for you, David?
So I think we kind of look at it a different way with an open source community where it's really volunteer driven, like what Joomla and like your community is. It's purely volunteer. So the question to maybe a corporate environment is one that's more readily answered with, well, of course you analyze the data as a team, or as mentioned, it might not be the team that analyzes it, but you discuss it with the team. In an open source type of community, that's really not that first obvious step. So really what I end up finding is that it's more important, first of all, to demonstrate to people the necessity of looking at the data as a team and learning from what the different results in the data show. So usually for me, what I've found is the first step is the education step. The first step is, okay, we need to realize that this data is here, and what can we learn from it? And once we got that, then the next step of explaining the data and analyzing it and trying to look at it together, that becomes that second step. But really for our environment, what ends up happening is that first step needs to be, hey, I know we're all volunteers, I know we're just kind of giving our time up, but can I get you to jump onto a Hangout or jump into a chat real quick and let's look at this stuff together? That's usually ends up being that first most important step.
Great.
I want to jump back to what Dom said for a second. Like, do you guys set goals with your team or for your team? How does that usually work for you? Like, how do you actually establish those goals that you're working towards with the data?
For me, and this might be a little bit different, I don't have a very large team. Like I recently have just gotten people on it. We're kind of new when it comes to social, which is equally fun and daunting. But what we do, and I think this sort of goes into what I know we're going to talk about a little bit later, especially with the C-suite, is for setting goals, it's kind of setting goals with areas of the company. So, explaining what I think social can do, hearing what other avenues, whether it's sales or community, community management or customer service or those different areas, what are they doing? What are they working towards? And how can we help? Like, how can we sort of charge that? And then sort of setting goals. All right, so if we get this kind of engagement here, and then when it comes to the team, really saying, all right, this is what we're working for. How do you think we're going to get there? What do you think a good measurement is? All right, let's go ahead and, obviously one of the things we talk about is always be flexible with those goals as well, because you need to be willing to change them, figuring out what we're actually going to do.
I think that's a good point, actually, and I think that's one point where we really relate in the community of an open source type of volunteer role, because it's not necessarily that it's with the team or even that it's before the team. It's more of both of them together, right? So maybe as the community manager, we're just that igniter. We're the person that comes with some initial ones that say, hey, these are some great things that we can look at and analyze, and then kind of just let it sit and see what comes up from other people as, okay, well, what about this? And it's a conversation starter. It helps people get more involved.
Yeah, I like, Sherry, what you were talking about as far as whether it's you picking the number or them picking the number. I kind of follow this Socratic method a little bit, where it's like I know the number that I want, that I think is both attainable and the client will be happy with, and then it's about coaching the rest of the team like to get to that same number, so that they all feel like they're basically pushing and saying, well, what could we get higher? Could we trying to get them through the same thinking process to get to a very similar number or close to it or right on it, so that everyone's on board with hitting that goal and nobody thinks like, this is a goal that I got to hit and I wasn't even a part of that decision.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I don't know why it was showing that it was. Anyway, so for us, sort of from an in-house take, what we do is although our main focus and our sort of base goals are going to be the same all the time, it's to provide great customer service, to build to grow our brand, and to not only build a community but to show off that community, because we have a brand that within our space does really well. We like to give back to the community and sort of promote the community members as much as possible. But depending on goal changes and objectives that may change from the company standpoint, we may change on a on a yearly, on a quarterly basis, some of the things that we're doing or some of the things that we're focusing on, or maybe a campaign or this or that, based on what the company goals are and how they might change. If the focus is like, okay, we're focusing on retention the next 6 months, we need to keep the people that we have. Whatever that case may be, our focus is very much going to be how do we participate as the community team in helping to achieve the greater organization goals. And again, while our main roles stay consistent, we will then, on top of that say, okay, what are we going to measure and how can we help with these bigger goals?
Great. Can you guys see? Oh, it doesn't look like it's sharing here. Hang on 1 second. Oh boy, I guess I'll just share it full screen here. So Maggie asks, how do you educate clients who may think they have one social media goal while another goal may actually be more important? Anybody want to take that?
I can try. Just like you can try to do what Maggie's question is. But I think the big thing is that I look at myself when it comes to like I've done sales a lot, and I think that that's one of the things where you really have to sort of be a little salesperson-ish, in that you have to ask the person questions, sort of ask them why they think that one goal is that, and brainstorm with them as to what their goal or what they actually might want to go to, and sort of lead them down a path of, it's one of those things where it needs to be their idea or else it's not really going to catch. And so you need to sort of work with them and take them on a path to sort of make it their idea. I know that sounds very like controlling, but at the same time, you're a professional, you're in this position for a reason, you know what goals they should have. So helping them along there and acting more as a coach rather than just one of their employees is something that I think is really important.
Awesome. I have one more quick question that came in, and that is from Trained Monkeys. Just curious to know how many of you use volunteers to help manage your communities. That's actually probably a pretty good question as far as ROI goes.
I can answer that one really quickly. All of them. I mean, everything is volunteer driven for us, so that's an easy answer.
Anybody else use volunteers for their communities?
Yeah, I can add a little bit to that, David, maybe. So we found out with our community that it has been growing so enormously over the years that there has been, how would you call it? So a lot of corporations and companies depend on our product. Now we really see that we used to have only volunteers, and now it's getting, so our association, it's getting some more paid people. So we have an executive secretary since a few months, and I, as a community manager, have been on the pay list for a few years. But this is kind of more a leadership role in the community. But we definitely see we are really at a very challenging point where even is a conversation about should we start a company, to give this project a direction. So I get a thumbs up across me. It's a very challenging thing, but it's like we said in the beginning, so we are totally different than a company-driven organization with having only volunteers, so our goals are pretty different. We don't have to sell stuff currently, but it looks like we're getting into a selling direction more and more. So we have companies like carriers, air carriers, and the car manufacturers, and they have certain demands at a certain point. So this is pretty interesting what's going on there.
Well, Jen, Sherry, do either of you use volunteers?
So we have, I would say we end up having people volunteer. Like they sort of help us out simply because they want to, but we're not actively recruiting them. However, we do have paid folks that we call associates, and those might be people who help us by answering questions in our Q&A forum. And they may, I should say, they may not actually answer the questions. They may be going in and looking for someone in the community who's left an excellent answer to a question about search engine optimization, and they go in and they endorse the answer, and they say, and they earn points for this, and so we do pay experts in the field in certain areas. So we have someone who is one of the top people in the industry in mobile marketing, someone in international marketing. We have many people in technical SEO and that sort of thing who will go in and answer questions. And so they're not volunteer, but they're also not making a ton of money. But they also get to say that they're a Moz associate, and many of them, they have that on their resume, they have that on their Twitter handle, and it adds some legitimacy, additional legitimacy to them in the greater online marketing community. So again, not volunteer, but in a similar sense of how that might work.
Cool. I'm going to bring in another quick question here from Christy. She asks, so Jennifer, you had thrown up, the Picto chart from your community's data, and she asks, are people more interested in infographic data versus an in-depth report? And then actually had a follow-up question of do you find that internals prefer infographic style reports or full-on presentations with lots and lots of data? And so, I guess this kind of actually blends right into our third question, which is talking about the C-suite and how do you present data to the C-suite. And so I think I just love your thought on it as far as quick snapshot versus pages and pages of reporting.
I think really it depends on, you have to know your audience. That's the biggest thing you have to pay attention to. For just using an example, I have, for one program that I do, I have a vice president, and then there's the president of the company, and so I'm reporting to them with stuff, and we deal with host families and students. Now, one of them, when I'm talking about students, it's very emotional connection for them, so they like to see the infographic style, sort of more overarching. The other stuff, it's kind of boring, so it's just like, just give me some data, just give me some bullet points. And then for the other person, it's opposite. And so I had to learn that before I went to each of them to sort of be able to prove that, and I think that that's what you have to do. Anybody that you're talking to, you have to sort of to fill it out, because you're not really going to. You have to make sure that you're saying the right thing to the right people.
And one thing that I've found is it's much easier to generate an infographic if you have a very detailed report already created. So usually if I know that, and again, just like Dom mentioned, I think it depends on who you're delivering to, but even if it's going to be an infographic, it may be beneficial. It may be the fastest way to create a good infographic to have done the detailed report. So even if the client never actually sees it, you create that and you have it. And then if by chance you misread it and they said, hey, I would love to get more detail on this particular piece, you can grab the full detailed report you've already written.
Yeah, I love that. So we, again, we're capturing things on a weekly basis and then sending this sort of infographic style thing out to the entire company and as well out to our entire community. And the internal email that goes out also has links to that in-depth data, and they can dig into the numbers, and they can see all kinds of information. What we send out to the community and to the greater company is just this, because when it comes down to it, people, not everyone cares about all that information.
But it is wonderful when you do get somebody that likes to geek out as much about data as you do, because then you can get into it and you're like, look at these different engagement numbers, look at this, look what we have going on here. And I do that Train Monkeys podcast with Maya and Emma, and we talk about all the time, sexy spreadsheets, hashtag, it's sweeping the nation. So
I'm the same way. At the minute someone's like, well, can you show me more? I'm like, yes, I can. Look at this. This is awesome. And watch this spreadsheet right here. This is where it gets really cool. I can turn this into a graph. Just watch.
That's awesome. One thing that Christy followed up with on Twitter was she says she thinks it's important your audience is on board with the plan and knows it, so you need less data. I personally kind of like the put it all in one report, but then have kind of like the storytelling and executive high-level big numbers that everyone really needs to care about up in front, and then like hey, here's a page. Now this page divides the behind the scenes, right, for all the spreadsheet junkies and everything else, where it's just loads and loads of data. That way, if an executive ends up seeing that report, they quickly get the high-level story out of it. But yet it feels like there was a lot that went into it, because it's like covered in data that they'll never look at.
And I think that it's really important, like going off of what David was saying as well, if you're creating those really detailed ones or you have it in your report already, nothing is worse and nothing makes you look worse as a community manager than having someone ask for more details and you not having them readily available. Like that kind of stuff is so bad, because they are used to having people gloss over stuff, but the minute they go, hey, can you give me more, and you don't have it, then they're automatically thinking, I could think of that myself. So it's really important to make sure that, really you're covering your own ass, that you know what you're talking about.
So when it comes to explaining this data, we're jumping into specifically question 3 now. It's how do you explain what the data actually means to the C-suite?
I think that sort of what it goes off of is like what I was talking about, the point earlier of going to all of these different areas and asking what their goals are and what they're working towards. I think that the best way to explain it is sort of that, sort of like the reverse of it, and going to the, all right, this is the goal that we had, this is what you want this area to do and this area to do. Here is how this is helping. This is what this actually shows, how it's, you know, going into this. This community is talking about this, you know, and that sort of thing, that when you're explaining it, you explain it not necessarily from a data first, but from a this is your goal, and this is how it's helping reach said goal.
Yeah, I think that's really important, and sometimes you have to re-explain what that goal is too, because they're focused on a lot more things a lot of times, and you have to remind them, oh, this is what we were working on here, and they're like, oh, yeah, that's perfect, yeah, and this is how it applies.
I also think that it really depends in a smaller organization, like at a startup. When we were a much smaller company, it was very different than it is today. It was, back then, I was very lucky that our CEO believed in community and understood the value sort of instinctively, and he was very much like, sure, you want to build a community? Like, tell me what you need, go for it. Whereas now, as we've gotten much bigger and the community has grown and we're trying to reach into new markets and lots of other things, it's a lot more about the data. It's a lot more specific, and I find that our executive team often wants to see specific numbers, how we're doing with this, how community is helping with this thing over here. You know, are less people engaged? You know, how is that helping with in our Q&A forum, which is for paid members only? You know, how is that specifically helping with retaining people or getting people to pay after their free trial? And you know, there are all these things happening. Whereas now it's much more specific about the data and how we're helping those bigger company goals than it was when we were a much smaller company and they were like, yeah, community sounds great.
I can really relate to what Jen is saying. I remember in the very beginning, we had, I think, a huge market share, especially in Germany. There was totally no need for any analysis, and that's like I said previously. So we are looking at a direction where we have more of a company-style management, and where the data also is getting much more important. And we are really looking at what tools we can start to use for analyzing these data. And let's see, maybe David can agree with that or also say something about this. That there's a tendency in a lot of open source communities to get some metrics going about the stuff that's going on. I mean, for open source communities, it's the same. So our market share has gradually gone down over the years. So there's a lot of other content management systems around. We really have to see, you know, what our unique propositions are and in what areas we can do something. David?
Yeah, I think you're right on. I think it's something that as a community in general we find ourselves looking at and trying to see, you know, analyze what it means. We wouldn't have necessarily a C-suite that all the data is going to for decision making, but more of just for transparency within the community of this is where we're at, this is ways in which we can improve, and that type of thing.
And I think, too, just to throw this out there, like even if you are small at a startup and no one's asking for those numbers yet, it's a great time to start practicing so that when you do start to grow and it's a matter of who gets more people and who gets more paid tools, etc., you can show that value and say, here, this is what we're doing now. Like, imagine if we could afford this much more. And you've already got the reporting under your belt, kind of used to the structure.
Yeah, C-suite is sort of like a girlfriend. You know, she wants you to know. She wants you to say that you're doing things and do them before she asks you, and then she gives you a little bit more leeway when you don't have it. So.
Great. So question 4, I guess you can go ahead and jump into that. Is there a difference on tracking day to day versus campaign to campaign? and which one is more beneficial?
I think there is a difference. There are, of course, similarities, but I think there are some differences in that the day-to-day is almost like checking the pulse, kind of feeling what's current, what's trending, what's active, and your campaign to campaign is a little bit more of an introspective look at how well are we doing on what our determined goals are, right? So it's two different focuses. One is kind of a listening approach, and one is the active approach. One is listening to what's going on the day-to-day, and then one is more actively how are we doing on our global or our campaign-to-campaign style.
Yeah, and I sort of I view one as campaign to campaign, at least, is a little bit more rigid, I think. You know, it's very, very clear sort of what you're going after. While day to day, at least I personally think if you're doing it right day to day, it has the ability to be a little bit more liquid. You know, you can sort of move and flow with where things are going. Obviously, if something big comes up, you need to be willing to change your campaign. But normally, before you start one of those, you really have a good idea of what you're going for, how you're going to get there, and you take it off. You know, you take off on that specific course. When before it's sort of, you know, day to day is more like a walk through the woods.
Yeah, I think, you know, when I think about campaigns too, a point I'd love to make is normally if you as a community manager are involved in a larger campaign within the company, there's probably some sort of plan, and you may have even been asked to put together like a PowerPoint or whatever explaining some of the things you're going to do with your community to activate on, you know, throughout this campaign. And I think it's really important that you know, right there at that moment before that campaign even starts, you have a plan of what you're going to measure to prove your success. Because if we want to talk about value here, you know, you want to know, A, what kind of stories am I going to tell to show my success, so I know what kind of screenshots me and my community manager should be getting to tell that story, and then the other is, what are the metrics that I'm going to have to show, like, hey, I did help hit this goal. So your day-to-days, your day-to-day analysis of your data is keeping you on track, right? So it's not the end of the campaign. You're like, oh crap, we're only at 10% of this one goal, right? So you definitely should be reviewing that daily to get to those goals that you've set. But then absolutely put together a wrap-up type of deck to then show, hey, look, here is what we did. Here's what we said we were going to do, and look at what we did, right? And then that's really showing your value, and probably more than a lot of your other team members, you know, as it relates to community management. So.
I love that. I think that is so important. For us, I wanted to say that one thing that we do, again, we have our general, like, day-to-day, keep things rolling. You know, we're answering questions on social. We have 2 blogs. We have lots of comments. We have a forum. You know, we have lots of things that are just happening and need to be managed on a daily basis. And for my team, it's a lot of fun when we have those campaigns that are, you know, take you out of the day-to-day normal stuff, and you get to maybe try something different. We also have the great thing that because our community is our online marketers, and we, you know, do online marketing in the marketing team, anything that we do can become content as well. And so we like to use those like presentations and stuff that you're talking about, and actually show our community and say, you know, we tried something out, and this is how, you know, this is what we were going for. This is what we ended up with. We had no idea that it would bomb or that it would be so successful. And we talk about how you can doing that as like a training thing as well. This is what we did. This is a case study. So it's kind of unique for us, but it's always been nice that it's like, for us, it's like anything we do, we can use it as you know, content for training other people on either what to do or what not to do.
I think that's really cool. I love that you guys actually use that as content and share out there, especially given the nature of your community specifically. They're probably really interested in that as well.
Yeah, and we get a lot of that on our site as well, like other people, because we're doing it. Other people will, submit content and stuff of things that they've specifically done where they want to share with others something that worked well. And again, often it's like, don't do this. Your site will
learn from my mistakes.
All your rankings in Google. But that's funny.
All right, so we'll roll into our final question here, and remember, guys, if you're watching, we probably will have time for at least one or two more questions, so keep firing away. Last is, how do you demonstrate value beyond ROI?
All right, I'm going to steal something right off the top, just to say it. This is very much Brew, very much Brian Fanzo. But I think one of the greatest ways to demonstrate value beyond ROI is just that sort of when you're monitoring daily, that screenshot the awesomeness. I think that that's really a big thing. Just the fun little comments, the little things that you say, the little things people say about how much they love it or how they like it. I mean, it's almost impossible to, it's more than just one extra reply. It means a lot more when there's an emotional connection there. So it takes it very much out of just the hard data and the numbers and into the emotional, actual, human connection that we strive for. So I think that that's one way that you can really do it.
Yeah, great. That's great you mentioned it. I think the stuff that David and me are working on, then we definitely go beyond ROI. And then I was also thinking, before we get into this conversation, how do we exactly define ROI? I mean, we're kind of talking about ROI as being a financial kind of thing, but what we heavily depend on in our community is ROI in the sense, of seeing progress, seeing communication, seeing some happiness, seeing that awesomeness going on. So I think this is a really interesting question for us guys working in open source communities.
For us, I absolutely love this question because there have been several times in the past couple of years. Most recently, we were hit really hard with DDoS attacks. I know many companies were getting hit hard. And before that, I think it was about a year and a half ago, some servers where we had stored a lot of our data crashed or went down. I don't even remember exactly what it was. And a lot of our data was down. You couldn't use our services for almost 3 days. And at that point, we should have lost most of our business. People should have left us because we had this technical problem that we couldn't get back. But they didn't. We actually had, I forget the exact numbers, but we, estimated that we were going to lose this huge percentage. We had a very, very small percentage of people leave us. People were, we wrote a blog post. We had our CTO write a blog post and explain everything that was going on. People were commenting and saying, we love you guys. I really need my data back, but I'm here. I'm behind you. So that is huge, right? That not just specifically money. Obviously, it was nice to not lose all of our customers or anything, but the fact that people really were behind us and they were like, okay, come on guys, get your shit together, but we're going to be here for at least a little while longer because we love you guys. And that was huge, and I think that really opened up a lot of people's eyes throughout the organization of oh, holy crap, we need to work extra hard for them because they're sticking around through a really tough time.
Yeah, it's really kind of fun and sad at the same time, our community, because we're working with so many people who have long-term medical conditions and whatnot, where they don't always have the greatest, sense of future, really. So we've had people literally thank us for the opportunity to be able to blog about how their condition has affected them, or share their story and get involved in different ways, because for them it's like a way that they can still have the creative outlet that they used to have a lot more access to. So being able to share those stories and everything really helps our whole team know that they're working on something that matters, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, we get the same thing here. I mean, we're talking about, you know, students that it's their dream to come over, families who love hosting and having kids in their home for 10 months, and then, you know, like students that want to share their stories about how their life is transformed and, you know, coming over here after 10, 15 years of being gone, feeling like they have a second family, you know, that kind of stuff. Those little posts that you get, or those videos, or anything like that, you know, they go far beyond just the, you know, the hard data and what it is for, you know, pay per whatever you're trying to get.
Yeah, it's almost like cheating, right? I mean, who else has a job where you can just like show all, like, every little interaction, right? If you're a customer service person on the phone, it's not like you can record all the cool stuff and then like ask somebody to listen to it all, right? I mean, we have this opportunity to show all these tiny little differences that we make every day, and prove all kinds of value that we're bringing to the company. So.
It comes down to the challenge of how to share the intangible benefits, and quite honestly, I think that's an exciting challenge. Just like you said, I mean, that's something that not a lot of people get to do, is find ways in which we can share that passion or that joy or even that sadness that someone else has shared with us or with the community, and how we can then share that with the others. That's absolutely what it comes down to, is how do we express the intangible.
Excuse me, sir, you came into the store and I noticed you're very upset. Can I take your picture right now, and then hopefully you'll be better at the end, and then we can be smiling and we'll take a little selfie.
Before and after, right? Before and after.
At least a little before and after. It'll be fun. There's things on the way out.
It'll be fun. Trust me. You'll find out later how fun it was.
You'll never guess how fun it could be.
Exactly. Customer selfies. Hashtag this dude's pissed. Hashtag just wait until the end.
All right. Well, we got 6 minutes left. So what do we want to do? We want to keep talking about this. Do we have any more questions that came out? I know in the chat, what you guys can't see, we have our own little chat here. We've been talking about Vegas.
Yeah, the board right behind me.
Board there.
Go ahead. What 3 community managers, if you had to pick, it's yourself and 3 other community managers, you're going to Vegas for a weekend, who are you choosing? That's what I want to know.
Someone actually tweeted that out on Twitter earlier because they read your whiteboard.
Well, I think it would be interesting to have people answer that.
I would only want Brew to go if his shirt actually says Mountain Brew instead of Mountain Dew. I think it just says Mountain Dew, but
that's actually pretty epic. Somebody who makes shirts, if you're watching this, please make me that shirt. I want it to say Mountain Brew. And then I have one that says J Brew that's like the same as J Crew, like the logo of J Crew, but it says J Brew. That was a pretty cool gift. But yeah, it's just straight up Mountain Dew. Sad face.
Bump, bump.
Bump, bump. All right.
This is what happens when questions don't last until the end of the chat.
All right.
This is everyone's incentive to ask questions next time.
No, that's all right. We always start a little late. We can end a little early. You know, we don't have to sit here and just banter about nothing. Sherry, what's going on next week?
Next week we are talking about managing community relationships.
Managing community relationships. Sounds great.
Awesome topic. Cool.
Cool. All right, guys. Well, we'll give you 4 days or 4 minutes of your Friday back. And
4 days of your Friday.
I keep saying days instead of minutes. So we'll see you next Friday. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.
See ya.
See ya.
Bye.